Hello, today we're going to be creating a really cool 3D text in creamy liquid texture effect using Photoshop. Before we jump into Photoshop, we're going to be using a program called CorelDraw to create the text, to customize the text. Let me point out that you really don't need to use CorelDraw. You can use Adobe Illustrator if if you're familiar with Adobe Illustrator. CorelDraw is just a good alternative to Adobe Illustrator. So this lesson is not about Illustrator or CorelDraw, so I assume you already know what to do. I'm going to be using a font called KG last time. You can use any font that fits your purpose, but so what we're going to do is to customize this font to the way we want it. I'm going to customize this font to look the way I want it to look. So you can customize your font to look the way you want it to look. Alright, begin by breaking the text apart. In CorelDRAW, I'm going to use Ctrl K to break the text apart. We are doing this in order to be able to arrange the individual letters, in a way that we want. So to be able to arrange these letters independently, we have to break it apart. Go ahead and arrange the text in different ways. Tilt the text, reduce the size for some, increase some. The tip here is to keep the first letter of the word bigger than the others. It makes it look better. So go ahead and arrange the text, make it look uneven. Once you finish arranging your letters the way you want, we're going to customize them by using the shape tool to edit the notes. You use the shape tool to edit the path of the curved text. What you do is you delete notes that you don't want. You can add notes to create, extra editing points. You can turn straight path to curves by simply right-clicking on the path and select the curve. I may not show everything here, but just by looking, you have an idea of what I'm trying to do. And if you're familiar with any other software you're using, it's going to be very easy for you to follow along. I want you to know that this part is not the most important part of this tutorial, because you can simply type your text the way you want and jump right into the next phase of this tutorial. So let's just go ahead and edit this text. Feel free to go ahead and rotate the letters, the way you want it, just to give it that extra funky look. I mean, if there are parts of text you don't want, you can simply trim them off. There are different tools you can use in doing that. I'm going to be using the Bezier tool to draw shapes and use those shapes to trim out parts of the text I don't want to give me the shape I want. You can use any shape that you want to trim out the text. You can draw a square, you can draw a circle, or you can simply use the shape tool to edit it the way you want. Just go ahead and just play around with it. Like I said earlier, after trimming out the part of the text you don't want, you can use the shape tool to edit the notes to the shape you want. Delete notes that you don't want, edit the notes, add new notes, just edit the curves of the text to give you the shape you want. Let me point out that there's really no rule as to how this text should look like. It's all up to you. Whatever looks good in your eyes. And also, I want to give you a tip. If you're going to be editing a text, you have to first of all convert it to curve. So even after breaking the text apart, you will need to convert it to curve by using Ctrl Q in CorelDRAW, or I think in Illustrator, what you do is you convert the text to an outline to be able to edit the parts. And then, if you're having any difficulties following along with this, you might want to check out, tutorials on how to use this software and how to edit paths on Bezier tools in CorelDRAW and Illustrator. So just check out tutorials on those aspects, and so you can follow along properly. All right, let me just go ahead and speed up this thing, and then once I'm done, we'll continue. Alright, once you're satisfied with the results, group your text, increase the width of the text to 5,000 pixels. The reason you're doing this is because you need, when we're exporting this text as a Photoshop document in a Photoshop format, you will need the resolution to be high enough for the purpose, that we're going to use it for. Because when creating the 3D objects, we will need to create it from a high resolution image in order to give us a good result. If the resolution of the exported text is not high enough, the 3D objects we're going to be creating is not going to have smooth edges. So we really need it to have smooth edges in order to avoid it looking bad. So that is the reason we are exporting this in a higher resolution than we started. Okay, now we are in Photoshop. We have imported our text into Photoshop. Note that this is no longer a text, as it were. It's now a curve. So in Photoshop here, this has become a raster image. That means it is not a vector. It is a raster image. It is a bitmap, So, and before Photoshop converts a raster image to a 3D object, it automatically, what it does is that it creates a walk path. It creates a path around that image in order to be able to extrude. And so it is actually extruding from the path, not the raster image itself. For the extrusion to look smooth, the curves on the path needs to be very smooth. They need to curve along the edges of our object, of the layer that we are working with. So in order to be sure that we're going to have a smooth path, we will actually create that path ourselves in order to see it. Because if we create it first, then Photoshop will not create it. It's going to use the one we already created. So it's better for us to have control over what Photoshop uses to extrude this layer. We will have to create the path ourselves. This gives us the opportunity to edit this path. If there are parts of this path that are not smooth, we can edit it ourselves, make it smooth, in order to achieve a better result. In order to create a path around the layer, we're going to do this by holding down Control on your keyboard and then clicking on the layer. Now this is going to create a selection on the layer. After this, you're going to move to the Paths panel, just in the same group as your Layers panel. Go to the Path panel. Then on the Path panel, just go down where you see an icon there where you have Create Path. Click on it to create a path around the layer. So as you can see, Photoshop has created a path, or rather, we have created a path around the layer. So we are going to examine this path, just go through it, look at if the path does not correspond with the shape of the layer, you use the path selection tool in Photoshop. Use that tool to edit the path and make it correspond to the curves on the layer. You can access the path selection tool just by tapping A on your keyboard. In order to be able to see what you're doing clearly, you may have to reduce the opacity of your layer in order to see the paths clearly. That will give you, it's going to make editing the path easier. It's going to increase the visibility of the path. Alright, so once you're done editing your path and you're satisfied with your results, so we're going to go ahead and create a new layer. Make sure that new layer is selected. Switch to the Path panel. You're going to see the path that you created earlier. Right click on that path and choose New 3D Extrusion from Selected Path. That is going to create our 3D object. And there we have it. Photoshop has created a 3D object. As you can see, the workspace has been switched to a 3D workspace. If you're doing this for the first time, Photoshop might ask you if you want to switch to a 3D workspace. Simply say yes, because you're going to be using the 3D workspace from now on. For this project, we're going to be reducing the size of our document because 3D feature of Photoshop is memory intensive. Just for the sake that you're using a system that is not high-end, it's not a high-performance system, you might want to reduce the size of the document that you're working with in order for you to be able to handle the rendering process. But if you're confident that your system can handle it, you can go ahead and use it as it is. And that's it for this part of this tutorial. In the second part of the tutorial, we're going to go into editing our 3D object and creating the liquid texture. See you in the next lesson.